while life certainly is short, comparison being made in the Word of God in the Old Testament and the New, to it being nothing more than a few days and full of trouble, coming forth like a flower that is soon cut down, or even as a shadow that continueth not. Life as a shadow. James chapter 4, of course, life is compared to a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes away. Life, friends and brethren, is very, very short. Even when we look at it from the expanse of time that the Old Testament heroes would have lived, and even that patriarch by the name of Methuselah, who lived for some 969 years, 969 years in comparison with eternity is vapor-like, for sure. But even during this short period of time that we have here upon this earth, some longer than others, we certainly have obligations. We have responsibilities that are attuned to the blessings that God has blessed us all with. I mean, do you really think that God is going to give us life and all that's good, air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, friends and family members, and yet not expect anything out of us in return? You see, along with the brevity of life, we also have to realize that the consequences for our actions and the consequences as well for our inaction counts. The story is told of a man who was traveling. He was trying to find brethren with which to worship. And as he traveled down the road, he never could find a building that had the right sign out front. And so he simply happened to see a building that had no markings whatsoever. And as the service had already begun, he made his way to the back door and he listened as a brother was praying. And in the prayer that was being prayed, it went like this: Father, forgive us of our sins of omission and our sins of commission. And he knew he was in the right place. But even though we recognize that those are two different categories of sin, why is it that we oftentimes would categorize sins of commission as being the more grievous? Why is that? Why is it that if we simply refrain from doing what we ought to do, that's not near as terrible, not near as bad, not near as condemning as it would be to be out and out involved in outright rebellion against God and doing that which He condemns us from doing? Friends, they all count. And when we look at ourselves, sometimes we may fail to see just how far-reaching consequences in actuality are. Did you know that the reason why you are sitting where you're sitting right now is the end result of decisions that were made many, many, many years ago by maybe not even anybody you know? But you're here nonetheless. Why is that? It's because consequences are necessarily attached to our actions. And they certainly do count. Now here's the question that we have to ask, because it gets right at the heart of what this lesson is all about. Who is it that we are affecting with our decisions? Who is it? The nearest and dearest to us. Those that we would fight a grizzly bear for. Who is it that we are thus affecting, either by sins of omission or sins of commission, that will result in changing the course of future history? Who is it? Well, obviously the answer is there. Take, for example, the world that we live in. Last week I was somewhat sad with the realization that in my 54 puny little years, I've made no more impact for good than I have. As I look back upon history and saw the despicable situations that have existed down through the years, and without a doubt, failing to speak up when I should, then I've contributed to what we see happening all around us on a daily basis. But the fact is, that doesn't just apply to me. It applies to everybody. To everybody. Hopefully you were brought painfully aware to the fact that only 2 years before I was born, 2 years before I was born, it was against the law for a white child and a black child to go to school together in the southern United States of America. Against the law. Punishable by imprisonment, jail time, for violation of law. The United States of America. And as we looked at the lives that have been lost due to wars that have transpired in our history, and then to look at the reason why those lives were lost in pursuit of freedom, and yet see in this country that so prizes freedom, that freedom was not enjoyed by its citizenry, it causes alarm. To who? Who would be concerned about things like that? Who should be concerned about things like that? Everybody. Everybody. Well, let me tell you something. The way things were 2 years before I was born was the end result of decisions that had been made by kinfolk, yours and mine, that led up to that point in time. And what exists in the world today, and more particularly among brethren today in the Lord's church, is the direct result of decisions that have been made in times past by you and me. And guess what? The future will be just like that too. What happens 56 years from now, if the world continues to stand, will be the result, to a great extent, of the decisions that you and I make by seeing the consequences in times past. We should be more aware and motivated to see to it that those consequences are good and not bad. That those consequences are what they are supposed to be and not what they just fall out to be without any assistance upon our part. And when you think that while 1.25 million men and women have lost their lives in the history of this country fighting for freedom, and to realize that that many babies are killed every year in the United States of America by abortion, then you say, maybe we have not arrived yet. Maybe there's still work to be done. And maybe while we're working on those things that need to be fixed, then there are other things being added to the pile constantly. And it's truly a coward who fails to see his responsibility in this sea of mess. Quotation. Nurturing families come in many forms, and children may be raised by a father and a mother, a single father, two fathers, a stepfather, and a grandfather, or caring guardian. Slide in to this statement of recognition of Father's Day only a few short weeks ago. You find listed the possibility exists of a nurturing household in which a child is blessed not just with one father, but with multiple fathers. If 2 is all right, friends and brethren, 22 is all right. That's the world that we live in. 2 fathers? It's not uncommon, friends and brethren, for young people to lose interest in spiritual matters. It's not uncommon for them to pull away and to become distant. It's not uncommon for them to start missing services sporadically, and then it develops into they're missing altogether. It's not uncommon for young people to become involved in alcohol and drugs, and it's not uncommon for young people to date, for young people to become engaged to, and to end up marrying non-Christians. The fact is that you end up, probably 99% of the time, marrying who you date. Arranged marriages are not the norm in this country, although in some instances I wish they were. They're not. You end up marrying who you date. Now notice the point here, and maybe one that we've not stressed as much as we should, and we will now. By saying that a person marries a non-Christian is not saying marrying a person who does not show up for services regularly. Because showing up for services regularly does not a Christian make. No more so than me gathering eggs in a hen house makes me a hen. This doesn't happen. There's more involved in being a Christian than simply being at the right place from time to time. Since a Christian is, by definition, a follower of Christ, that simply means that when young people marry someone who is not a follower of Christ, then they should not be surprised if that which they marry is not helping them to get to Christ and get to heaven. I was listening just this past week at the invitation of a dear lady that I live with to a lesson presented relative to this type of subject. A young lady went to the preacher and said, "Oh, I've got a terrible problem. Terrible problem. My husband won't go to services with me." He says, "Oh, that's a terrible thing. Terrible, terrible thing. Honey, did he go with you to services before y'all got married?" She said, "No, he didn't, but he said he would when we got married because his mama wouldn't let him while we weren't married." Red flag should have went up real high right then. Said, and not only that, not only will he not come to services with me, but he also uses bad language. Speaks in such a derogatory way about anything that's right and good, and curses and uses the Lord's name. Honey, did he do that before you got married? Well, yeah, he did, but he said he was going to quit when we got married. And on and on and on we go. When is it that both male and female, young men and young women, are going to realize that just getting someone to say, "I do," does not change their obnoxious personality into a loving one? Now, there's been terrible disagreements that have resulted down through the years because poor old unassuming girls think that once they get that boy married, then he's not going to watch football no more. What a joke. He's not going to watch racing anymore. Not going to be concerned with hunting anymore. It's not, all those things are going to be changed whenever I marry him. We need to face reality and get out of the dream world that's oftentimes promoted by a Hollywood crowd. It simply is not that way. And the sooner we deal with the facts of the matter, the better off we're going to be. Because it's not uncommon for us to lose our children to the devil. And when they're lost to the devil, folks, that is as far away as they can possibly be. What causes it? Why does that happen? If we can figure out some of the reasons why, and we can work on it, and let me say this, young people being willing to work on it too. Approaching it from an intellectual standpoint. Most of the time, young people can understand that if you've got a loaded gun and there is only one chamber that does not have a bullet in it, then to put that gun to your head after spinning the chamber is called Russian roulette. Most people understand that. But when all the chambers are full and every decision is going to be directly at odds with what the Bible teaches, that is not Russian roulette. That is suicide. Spiritually so. And our young people are committing it by the droves. Why? First and foremost, has to be the case. It's because of the bad influence of their so-called friends. The passage will stay in the Bible until the Lord returns and then some. Be not deceived. Evil communications corrupt good manners. Or, American Standard, evil companionships corrupt good morals. You simply cannot run with dogs and not smell like and act like a dog. The wise man Solomon put it this way: My son, if sinners entice thee, consent thou not. If they say, Come with us, let us lay wait for blood, let us lurk privily for the innocent without cause. My son, walk not thou in the way with them, refrain thy foot from their path. Now here's the thing about this type of problem. We start the school with a group of kids. Now they start in kindergarten. We didn't have to do that. We were smart enough. We started in the first grade. You start the school with a group of kids, and you go to school and grow up with the same group of kids. Okay? And you know that little old boy that you learned to color in the lines with in the first grade has some decency to him way down deep because you saw it. As a matter of fact, you might know and you might realize that individual would do anything in the world for you. But he'd also do anything in the world for you from the wrong side of the equation as well. And the sooner we realize that there are things that develop over the years that are deserving of being avoided, the better off that we're going to be. Now, most people who grew up when television was worth something knows about old Eddie Haskell. Eddie Haskell would say, Don't you worry, Miss Cleaver. I'll make certain that Wallace does not act irresponsibly. And it was a joke, you know. Now, Eddie Haskell was not selling dope on the side. He wasn't trying to entice Wallace or Wally to get drunk or anything like that. But even his mom and daddy were on the ball enough to know that Eddie was a showman. He could put on a good face. He could say the right thing. Oh, that's a lovely dress that you have on, June. Or Miss Cleaver. But we can see through that mentality, can't we? Or can we? Don't you worry. Your kids are safe with me, said Charles Darwin. Are they? Let me ask you something. If we are really nothing more than educated apes down the long line of an evolutionary scale, what's the problem with bestiality anyway? What's the problem with, two fathers? Or two mothers? Or how about 20 fathers or 20 mothers? How about 20 fathers and 20 mothers all at the same time? What's wrong with that anyway? Well, there's nothing wrong with it. If Charles Darwin was telling the truth, but can you trust Charles Darwin? I guarantee you can trust Eddie Haskell before you can trust Charles Darwin. Did you trust him? You don't have to worry. Nice little innocent, excellent singing voice, pervert with a capital P. Don't you worry. Don't worry. I'll take care of him. He's safe with me. I know the neighborhood we're going to be going into. Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. And then we come to him and say, now, finally we found somebody that we can actually trust. Now we've got somebody that when they say, don't you worry, then we know for a fact we don't have to worry. Really? True or false statement? I can tell by looking at a person that they will be no threat to the soul of my child. True or false? There's no way. You cannot tell by looking at a person whether they're going to be a threat to the soul of your child or not. Love, real love, agape love, demands concern. It demands concern of parents for children. It demands concern of brethren for other brethren and their children. It demands concern of brethren or children to their parents. Love demands concern. And there's another thing about this love that demands concern. It necessitates asking questions. That's just a big word. It means it makes necessary. If somebody loves you and somebody is concerned about you young people, they will be asking questions. Oh, it may sound like they're asking a whole bunch more questions you won't answer. But compare it to the day when they asked, where are you planning on riding that tricycle? I'm old enough to know where I ride my bicycle. Tell me not to ride a tricycle out in the middle of the road. What, do you think I'm stupid? Be aware that the questions are a demonstration of love. And not the very opposite, which most people, sadly, think they are. We simply ask this question. Are we questioning? Is it possible that we are just too trusting of people? That we just want to think the best out of situations and think the best out of people to the extent that we just trust, and that's what gets us in trouble so many times as parents, is we're just too trusting. Or maybe the word is not too trusting. Maybe the word is just naive. Maybe we're just ignorant. Because, the word naive simply means immature or inexperienced. Now you think about that. Too trusting or naive, immature, inexperienced. Now wait a minute. Who is this we're talking about that's naive, immature, and not experienced? It's the parents. You mean to tell me that there are teenagers that are not near as naive, not near as immature about these type of things, and not near as inexperienced as the parents are? Yes. And it didn't happen overnight either, folks. Naive. Let me tell you something about this naive stuff. It is easy. Easy. It's easy to not ask questions. It's easy to not demonstrate any concern. It's easy to twist it around and make it look like that you have the best interest of your child at heart. But don't falsely call it concern and love, because it's not. Concern questions. Concern wants to know. Concerning this matter of naive, to the church at Corinth, Paul wrote, lest Satan should get advantage of us, for we are not ignorant of his devices. Now, the principle here has to do with a brother that in the first epistle had to be withdrawn fellowship from because of his incestuous relationship with his father's wife. And what Paul is instructing the church to do is to accept that guy back and not be an overburden on him when he's repented and is changing his life. And their failure to properly bring him back into the fold, as it were, in their fellowship, is a tactic, is a device of Satan that leads to eternal ruin. But here's the point. It's possible to be ignorant of Satan's devices. I mean, there's no doubt about that. But it's one thing to be ignorant of Satan's devices, and another thing altogether to close your eyes and stop your ears so that you don't have to know about the devices. When somebody's trying to help you to know the schemes and the mechanisms that Satan uses to take our children to hell, that's not being naive. That's actually fighting with the enemy. We don't want to be ignorant of Satan's devices. And what more graphic picture do we have than 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8? Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about seeking whom he may devour. Did you know Tarzan had less difficulty with a charging rhinoceros than he did a lion? He could take on an elephant before a lion. Oh, an angry, hungry lion is descriptive of how the devil looks at all of us and looks at our children that way as well. In Romans chapter 12, verse 1 and 2, Paul said, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Now notice this idea of reasonable service. Paul says, this that I do in giving myself, my body, as a sacrifice to the Lord, makes sense. It makes sense. It's reasonable. It's rational. It's reasonable and it's rational to not be conformed to the world, but to be transformed from it. Because ultimately, of course, the world and all that's in it is going to go the way of all the earth as well. Try this, parent. Here's a young'un, your son or daughter, wants to spend time with them. Find out they're spending a little bit more time with them that you were aware of. Then ask your child this question. Why not ask him or her to come to church with you? Ask for them to come to church with you. Now, let me tell you about that question. If you would be embarrassed to do that, then that says a whole lot more about you than it does about him. It says a whole lot more about the child who is embarrassed to ask his buddy or his girlfriend or her girlfriend to come. It says more about them than it does about this so-called friend that needs to be walking into this circle of friendship. Embarrassed? Friends and brethren, let me tell you something. If a person is too cool to go to church, then where they're going is too hot for me to be. And if somebody is so cool that the whole church scene turns them off, then there is somebody that needs to be given back to where he wants to be in and not spend any time with them. What difference does it make in you? Does it really make any difference? We see this whole issue of whether we are here by the result of evolution or we're here by the result of creation gives us an opportunity to answer that question. Does it make any difference? Well, not if we want to buy into the atheistic idea of things, which is the evolutionary way of things. Does it make any difference? Does it make any difference? Well, if we let culture decide what we're supposed to do, where we're supposed to go, what we're supposed to wear, and all of that, then we can't really give that much time to revelation, because when it comes to our Creator, when it comes to the revelation that He's given, then it does matter. Now, if I find myself as a teenager and I'm sort of tottering over towards that, well, it doesn't really matter that much, then folks, I am leaning toward a home in the place prepared for the devil and his angels. That's where I'm leaning to. There are no ifs, ands, and buts about it. Put on your thinking cap for me. Our devotional reading a few moments ago, Isaiah chapter 1, verses 1 through 6. Isaiah said, here is the vision that I have seen. I saw the Lord lifted up, His train filled the whole temple. Here were angelic beings that had multiple sets of wings, and they cried out, holy, holy, holy is the Lord. Full of glory. And at the sound of those angelic beings and the pure majesty of the whole situation, the building shook, it filled with smoke. It was and I don't even like this word, but it was an awesome sight. for Isaiah to see. But what did he do? He said, oh, woe is me. Woe is me. I mean, you've experienced, heavenly worship here. You've seen the Lord full of His glory, the smoke, the sound. And you say, woe is me. Woe is me because I am a man of unclean lips. And just so happens, everybody I know, they're just like me too. They are men and women of unclean lips. What's that mean? Well, there's a bunch of different things that it could possibly lend itself to, but I am pretty well convinced that it simply means that Isaiah, maybe for the first time ever, the first time in a long time, becomes painfully and deeply aware of how puny he is and how big and majestic God is. He doesn't say, man, let's get this place a-rocking. Give me a microphone. No. He says, woe. What did he do that for? Because he was seeing himself, get this, as he really is. And he was seeing God as God really is. Boy, that can be somewhat humbling. Recognize me in comparison to God. You see, that's simply dealing with reality. That's not just something conjured up and stuck in the middle of the book of Isaiah to be interested in reading. That's simply descriptive of the way things actually, really are. I'm nothing without God. With God, I am somebody, and heaven's going to be my eternal home. And if I have difficulty grasping that grain of truth, God help me and help somebody else to help me see that significant fact. Right there. Because then, see, it does matter. Then, consequences do count. Decisions are important. But because of that realization, right there. Think. A world of unclean lips. That's where Isaiah was, and that was before, get this, that was before Gone with the Wind. I remember people talking about it, but I was not actually there to hear the uproar that was the result of them sticking a word such as they did into Gone with the Wind. And yet tonight, a 30-minute sitcom is what? 30 or 40 real curse words in it? And we don't even know. A world of unclean lips. This here's one thing. Isaiah saw things as they really were, and then, when God was needing someone to speak for him, Isaiah said, here am I. Send me. Now, the only way it was possible for him to be able to do what God wanted him to do is he had to first recognize who he was. He had to know the littleness of himself and the bigness of God. He had to be humbled at the majesty of God and had to shrink in his own awareness and his own assessment of his little old self. But if I've got to be the big dog, if I've got to be the popular, if I've got to be the one that everybody looks to, that stays up on everything, that does everything, that's at the head of the pack, leading the charge and all that, now I forget about ever having any time to do what the Lord wants me to do. I'm too busy doing my thing with everybody else. Gone with the wind. A 40-year-old virgin. Man, what a killer movie. I ain't never seen it. I don't know. But I know what our world does. it makes fun of somebody that's pure. And I know a world that makes fun of somebody that's pure and saves themselves for their spouse. That's a world full of unclean living. I know that. The story is told. This girl was in college, freshman. And it wasn't long, this freshman year in her college years, that some of the other girls, first her roommate, and then other girls down the hall became aware of this terrible consequence, this terrible problem this girl had. She was a virgin and a freshman in college, of all things. And it went all over the dorm. What a hoo-ha, laughing to glee because of this poor old girl who was a virgin still. At 19 years old, of all things. And finally, she took about all of it she could. And her roommate came in and said, listen, we're going to fix your problem. She said, listen, I want to tell you something about my so-called problem. If I wanted to, I could go out tonight and I could become what you and all the rest of these girls are. But you can never be what I am. Purity, a joke? We've got to reverse the trend, folks. And we don't reverse the trend jumping on the interstate going in the same direction. We don't do it. Could that be your daughter? I mean, he says he loves me. And as he helps me get back up off the floor after I've got down there, he can be so kind and loving and gets the ice and puts on my head and helps me. And then the next time. And then the next time. Did he hit you when y'all were dating? Well, yeah, but he said he was going to quit after we got. Just one time. Sweet little old girl. 8 months later. That's called methamphetamine. Sweet little old girl. 8 months later. That's called methamphetamine. Just one time. And I mean Eddie Van Halen, I mean popular rock band, good-looking wife. They were making it until he decided to get strung out on methamphetamine. Just one time. Now here's a question. Are kids like these really worth the effort? Are they really worth it? I mean, it's effort. There's no doubt about it. The easy thing to do is nothing. But to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it's sin. And while it may be looked upon and properly classified as a sin of omission, it's still a sin. And sin has consequences. It may be that in our audience this morning, there are one or more who are not in a covenant relationship with God because they're not Christians. They've never obeyed the simple commands of the gospel. They've never allowed the Lord to add them to the church because they've never been baptized into Christ for the forgiveness of their sins as penitent, believing confessors. That's a situation that you can remedy right now. You can become a child of God today. You can become what they were in the days of the New Testament. What were they? They were saved. They were members of the Lord's church. They were worshiping and working under apostolic authority. They were doing all things to honor and glorify God, and they knew that even when they shed their blood as martyrs, that they had a home in heaven. And we can have that same assurance. If you had that assurance in times past but lost it, squandered it, wasted it, come home. While together we stand and while we sing.